I never thought I'd be the guy telling this kind of story, but here I am. My name's Mike, and what I'm about to share still feels like a nightmare I haven't fully woken up from. I used to think I had it all, a stable job, a cozy home, and a wife, Emma, who I believed was my partner in everything. But life has a funny way of peeling back the curtain when you least expect it. It all started when I decided to switch jobs. This wasn't some impulsive decision I made overnight. My current job paid the bills, sure, but it wasn't enough to meet the goals I had for us. I wanted more, not just to get by, but to thrive. A new car, a better neighborhood, financial freedom beyond scraping by paycheck to paycheck. These weren't just pipe dreams, they were plans. And I was determined to make them happen. I spent weeks combing through job listings, comparing opportunities, analyzing what fit my skills best. It wasn't easy. The competition was tough, and the positions that paid well demanded more time, more energy, more of me. But I wasn't afraid of hard work. I'd been grinding my whole life. The problem wasn't the work itself, it was making sure that work actually led to progress. More money, better stability, a future. When I brought it up to Emma, I expected her to be supportive, maybe even excited. But her reaction caught me off guard. She wasn't negative, just indifferent. "You already work hard," she said softly. "Do you really need more stress?" I appreciated the concern, but it wasn't the kind of encouragement I'd hoped for. Stress was part of the deal, and I was willing to carry it if it meant a better life for us. To be fair, she had her own perspective. She wasn't working, hadn't been for a while, choosing instead to manage the house full-time. I respected that. She kept things organized, meals cooked, the house spotless. But there was a part of me that couldn't ignore how much further we could go if she chipped in financially, even just a little. We had that conversation more than once. "I'm better at making sure everything runs smoothly here," she'd insist. And she wasn't wrong. The house always felt warm, clean, like a place you wanted to come back to after a long day. But it still felt like we were leaving opportunities on the table. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up. If she wasn't going to change her mind, I'd just carry the weight myself. It wasn't ideal, but what choice did I have? Starting the new job hit harder than I'd expected. The workload was brutal, the hours long. Each day felt like running a marathon without a finish line. I'd come home drained, too tired to eat some nights. Sleep. That became a luxury I couldn't afford. My mind refused to shut off, replaying work deadlines, project goals, everything waiting for me the next day. Emma noticed. She'd comment on how tired I looked, asking if I was okay. Eventually, she suggested seeing a doctor. At first, I brushed it off. Admitting I couldn't handle it felt like failure. But the exhaustion was eating me alive, so I gave in. The doctor listened, nodding like he'd heard the same story 100 times before. "Stress," he said. "Classic burnout." He prescribed a mild tranquilizer and sleeping pills to help me reset. I hated the idea of relying on medication, but I was desperate. And for a while they helped, sort of. I wasn't as tense, but I also wasn't fully present. Life became this hazy routine: work, eat, sleep, repeat. Emma was supportive, in her own way. She'd remind me to take the pills, encourage me to rest. She'd say, "This is just temporary. You'll adjust." I wanted to believe her, even though deep down, something didn't feel right. Weekends used to be our time. But now, even those felt like an extension of my workweek. She'd suggest going out, spending time together, but I'd decline more often than not. I promised her it would get better. "Just give me time," I'd say. "It's not forever." But that's the thing about life, you don't always see the cracks until something shatters. And the cracks in our marriage were about to split wide open. One evening, after another exhausting day at work, Emma approached me with a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a while. She told me her friend, Lisa, had invited her to a small get-together. Something casual, she said, with people who were well-connected. Apparently, they might even have leads on better job opportunities for me. The idea sounded promising on paper. Less stress, more money. Who wouldn't want that? But something about it felt off. "How do they even know about me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She shrugged casually. "Lisa mentioned your situation. They've helped people in similar positions." It's worth a shot, right? Her enthusiasm was strange. Emma wasn't the social butterfly type. She preferred quiet nights at home, movies on the couch, just the two of us. But here she was, practically buzzing with excitement. She spent more time than usual picking out an outfit, fixing her makeup, adding those little details she never fussed over before. It was like she was preparing for something more than just a casual meetup. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just trying to help in her own way. That night, as she walked out the door, a weird feeling settled in my chest. I wanted to believe this could be a turning point, that maybe her friend's connections were real and could help me out of the hole I'd been digging at work. But there was a part of me, buried deep under all the exhaustion, whispering that something wasn't right. Hours passed, and she didn't come back. When she finally stumbled through the door well past midnight, I could tell right away, she'd been drinking. Her cheeks were flushed, her steps unsteady, and the faint smell of alcohol clung to her like perfume. Emma rarely drank, and when she did, it was never like this. But she was all smiles, giddy almost. "How was it?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, even though my gut was screaming. "It went great," she slurred slightly, plopping down on the couch. "I've got some really good news, but, ugh, not now. I'm exhausted. I'll tell you tomorrow. Just wait, it's worth it." And with that, she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me sitting there, staring at the empty space she'd left behind. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just excited. Maybe the drinks were part of the networking. But her behavior gnawed at me. The next morning, she was back to her usual self, or at least she pretended to be. Over breakfast, she finally opened up about the night before. She'd met a few people who could help me land a better job. They were well-connected, she said again, but there were still some things to sort out before they could officially introduce me. "They're really busy people," she explained. Her words rushed like she was rehearsing a script. "But once everything's lined up, they'll come over and meet you. It's just complicated. Complicated." That word stuck with me. When I suggested inviting them over sooner rather than later, she hesitated. "They will. Just not yet. I need to handle a few things with Lisa first. Trust me, it's better this way. Trust me." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But that feeling, the one I'd pushed aside the night before, was still there, whispering in the back of my mind. Days turned into weeks, and Emma's outings became more frequent. Always the same excuse: it's for the job stuff. She'd leave early, come home late, offering vague explanations about meetings and errands. At first, I didn't question it. After all, she was trying to help, right? But it was hard to ignore the patterns. The late nights. The rushed excuses. The way she'd dodge specific questions with a quick smile and a deflective, "You'll see. It'll all be worth it soon." And then there were the pills. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd bring them to me with a glass of water, her voice gentle, reminding me to take them like clockwork. "You need to stay on top of this," she'd say, her concern sounding genuine. But after a while, her insistence started to feel different. Like it wasn't just about my health anymore. One morning, as I sat at the table, I caught her adding something to my coffee. It was quick, subtle, barely a flick of her wrist. When I asked about it, she laughed it off. "Just sugar," she said with a grin, like I was being silly for even noticing. But I knew how I took my coffee. Black. Always black. That's when the pieces started to click. The drowsiness wasn't just from the pills. The fog in my head wasn't just from work stress. She was slipping something into my food, my drinks, making sure I stayed just groggy enough, just unaware enough. And suddenly, everything made sense. The late nights. The secrecy. The overly helpful attitude with my medication. I didn't say anything right away. I needed to be sure. So that night, when she handed me my usual pill with a glass of water, I pretended to swallow it, slipping it under my tongue until she left the room. Then I tucked it into my pocket. I waited until she thought I was asleep, lying in bed with my breathing slow and steady. That's when I heard it, the soft creak of the bedroom door opening. I kept my eyes closed, listening as she hovered for a moment before quietly closing the door again. Then came the sound of voices downstairs. Men's voices. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about helping me find a better job. This was about something else entirely. I laid there, pretending to be asleep, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she'd hear it. The muffled voices downstairs grew clearer. Laughter, casual banter, the clinking of glasses. There weren't just one or two men. There were several. I strained to pick up their words, but the voices blended together, a cocktail of arrogance and easy familiarity. None of it sounded like business talk. After about 20 minutes, curiosity and rage got the better of me. Quietly, I slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound. My handgun was in the drawer beside the bed. Just in case, I'd always told myself. This wasn't the kind of just in case I'd ever imagined, but I grabbed it, checking that it was loaded. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew it wasn't good. I crept down the hallway, my footsteps silent against the cool hardwood floor. As I reached the top of the stairs, I peeked around the corner, and my stomach twisted into a knot. There she was, Emma, in the middle of the living room, surrounded by men. She wasn't hosting some business meeting or networking event. She was laughing, leaning into one guy's chest, his hand resting way too comfortably on her hip. Another man sat on the couch, eyes glued to her like she was the only woman on earth. The others lounged around, drinking, talking, relaxed in a way that told me this wasn't their first time here. My wife, my Emma, was entertaining them like I didn't even exist. The room spun for a second, my vision narrowing. Betrayal isn't a sharp sting. It's a slow, suffocating pressure that crushes your chest and steals your breath. I tightened my grip on the gun, trying to keep my hand steady, my mind racing. I could have burst in, guns blazing, screaming like some unhinged maniac. But I didn't. I stepped into the room, calm, controlled, the barrel of my gun pointing at the floor, but ready. "Everyone out," I said, my voice low but firm. Silence. Like someone had hit pause on the whole scene. Emma's smile froze on her face, her eyes widening when she saw me. The men exchanged glances, some confused, others trying to size me up, as if deciding whether I was a real threat. One guy, tall, broad, with the kind of arrogance you could smell, laughed. "You're not going to do anything with that," he sneered, taking a lazy step toward me. "Why don't you put the toy down and go back upstairs?" I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I raised the gun, my aim steady, finger hovering over the trigger. "Get." "Oh, no." Most of the guys weren't as brave as the loudmouth. They backed off quickly, heading for the door, muttering curses under their breath. But not him. He smirked, glanced at Emma like she'd somehow save him with a look, then turned back to me. "I said shut up," he barked, his arrogance boiling over as he lunged. Bad move. The gunshot cracked through the room like lightning, echoing off the walls. He crumpled to the floor, clutching his leg, screaming in pain. Blood spread across the carpet like spilled wine. Chaos erupted. The remaining men scrambled, tripping over each other to get out. I kept the gun raised, daring anyone to test me again. No one did. Then it was just me, Emma, and the guy on the floor, groaning and cursing between sobs. The room smelled like gunpowder, sweat, and cheap cologne. Emma stood frozen, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. Good. Because I wasn't interested in anything she had to say. Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Neighbors must have heard the shot and called the cops. I didn't run. I didn't even move. I just stood there, the gun still in my hand, as flashing lights painted the walls red and blue. When the officers burst in, I lowered the weapon slowly, placing it on the floor. Hands raised. No resistance. They separated us immediately, Emma on one side, me on the other. I told them exactly what happened, the pills, the late nights, the strangers in my home. I explained how I'd acted in self-defense when the guy came at me. Emma tried to keep her story straight, but her voice was shaky, her words stumbling over themselves. She didn't deny the gathering. She couldn't. But she tried to paint it as something innocent, a misunderstanding, like the blood on the carpet wasn't screaming the truth for her. The other men had already disappeared into the night, cowards leaving their wounded friend behind. Paramedics treated him on the scene, his bravado replaced by pathetic whimpers. Eventually, after hours of questions and paperwork, the police let me go. They said there'd be an investigation, but it was clear they saw through Emma's lies. The facts were right there. The sedatives in my system, the man bleeding on my living room floor, the witness, me, sober, coherent, with nothing to hide. When they left, the house felt hollow. Empty in a way it had never been before. Emma sat on the couch, her head in her hands, shaking. I didn't say a word. I just walked upstairs, grabbed her suitcase, and started packing. This wasn't a conversation. This was the end. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to curse. The silence did all the talking. I packed Emma's things without saying a word, her clothes, shoes, all the little trinkets she thought made this house a home. Each item I shoved into a bag felt like ripping out the stitches that held my life together. But I kept my hands steady, my face blank, because I was done. Done with her lies, her games, her betrayal. When I came back downstairs, she was still on the couch, her head in her hands like that could somehow undo everything. I dropped the suitcase at her feet with a loud thud that made her flinch. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice shaky, her eyes red and swollen. I stared at her, feeling nothing. No love. No sadness. Just emptiness. "You're leaving," I said flatly. "This marriage is over." Her face crumpled like I'd slapped her. "Mike, wait. I can explain." "Explain." I cut her off, my voice low but sharp. "You drugged me. You let strangers into our home. You've been sneaking around behind my back, and now someone's bleeding all over my damn floor because of you. What's left to explain?" She opened her mouth, searching for words, but nothing came out. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. "Not anymore. You're really going to divorce me," she whispered like she couldn't believe it, like I was the bad guy in this story. I leaned in, my face inches from hers, and spoke the words slowly, so there was no room for misunderstanding. "You drugged me so you could sneak around with other men. There's nothing left to salvage." She didn't argue. She knew. Deep down, she knew this was the end. She packed the rest of her stuff in silence, and when she left, I didn't watch her go. I just stood there, staring at the door after it clicked shut, feeling the weight of everything that had just collapsed around me. The house felt different without her. Quieter. Colder. But there was also a strange sense of relief. Like I could finally breathe, even if the air still stung. The court proceedings came fast. I had evidence, the sedatives she'd slipped into my food, the medical records, even the testimony from the night of the shooting. My lawyer was ruthless, laying out every detail with surgical precision. Emma tried to play the victim, but her story fell apart under the weight of the facts. The judge wasn't buying it. When the verdict came down, it was clear, I won. She was ordered to compensate me for emotional distress, medical expenses, and the financial strain she'd caused during her little adventures. The amount was substantial, more than I expected. She had to take out a loan just to pay me back, which felt like poetic justice. But the money wasn't the victory. The victory was knowing she had to live with the consequences of what she'd done. Every dollar she paid me was a reminder of her failure, her betrayal, her lies. I used the settlement to get my life back on track. Paid off debts. Fixed the house. Replaced the carpet, the one stained with blood and bad memories. It wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. Weeks passed, and the house grew quieter. But this time, it was a peaceful kind of quiet. I focused on work, rebuilt my routine, and slowly, I felt the pieces of myself coming back together. Then, one evening, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, there she was. Emma. She looked different, disheveled, tired, like life had finally caught up to her. Her eyes were swollen with fresh tears, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Mike, I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. Can we talk?" I stared at her, feeling nothing but cold indifference. "You have some nerve showing up here," I said, my voice flat. She started rambling about how she'd changed, how she regretted everything, how she just wanted to make things right. I didn't let her finish. Without another word, I stepped back and slammed the door in her face. The sound of the lock clicking into place felt like the final chapter snapping shut. She was part of my past. And that's exactly where she was going to stay. I thought that was the end. The door was closed, literally and figuratively, and I had no intention of ever reopening it. But life has a twisted sense of humor. Just when you think the storm has passed, it sends a little aftershock to remind you who's in charge. A few weeks after slamming the door in Emma's face, I was settling into my new normal. Work was steady, the house was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again. The scars were still there, sure, but they'd started to fade, tucked beneath new routines and the comforting silence of a house free from lies. Then came another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't tentative or hesitant. It was loud, sharp, like someone demanding attention, not asking for it. When I opened it, there she was again. Emma. But she wasn't alone. Flanking her were two men I'd never seen before, broad-shouldered, rough around the edges, with that look in their eyes. The kind of look that says, "We're not here for a friendly chat." Emma's face was twisted with anger, not sadness. No tears this time, just pure venom. "You ruined my life," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "Do you think you can just walk away from this without consequences?" One of the guys stepped forward, crossing his arms like he was auditioning for the role of intimidating tough guy. "We know everything," he sneered. "You think you can humiliate her like that and get away with it? You're gonna regret this." I didn't flinch. I'd been through hell and back because of her. There was nothing left in me to intimidate. "Get off my property," I said, my voice low, steady, the same tone I'd used the night I pulled the trigger. But instead of backing down, they pushed past me, forcing their way into my home like they owned the place. Emma followed, her mouth running, hurling accusations, her words fueled by bitterness and whatever fantasy she'd built in her head where she was the victim. That's when the switch flipped in me. I moved calmly to the drawer where I kept my gun, same one from that night, loaded, ready. My fingers wrapped around the grip like it was an old friend. When I turned back, the room went still. The men's bravado melted faster than snow under a heat lamp. One of them stammered, trying to backpedal. "Hey man, let's just talk about this." But the sound of me cocking the gun cut through his words like a knife. "You have 5 seconds to get out of my house," I said, my voice calm, too calm. Their tough guy act crumbled. They exchanged a quick, panicked glance before stumbling toward the door. "We'll see you again," one of them muttered as they retreated. I smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "I hope not," I replied, slamming the door shut behind them. The second the lock clicked, I went into full survival mode. I wasn't about to let them, or anyone else, pull something like that again. I upgraded the locks, installed security cameras, reinforced the windows. My home became a fortress, not because I was scared, but because I was done being vulnerable. Days passed. Then weeks. No more knocks. No more threats. They'd tested me, and they'd failed. Emma never showed her face again after that. Maybe she realized that whatever hold she thought she had on me was gone. Maybe those guys figured out that I wasn't the kind of man you could scare into submission. Whatever the reason, they disappeared like ghosts, leaving nothing behind but a story I'd carry with me for the rest of my life. But here's the thing about stories: they don't define you. They're just chapters. And that chapter, it was over. After that last encounter, the silence that settled over my life wasn't just peaceful, it was powerful. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but full. Full of clarity. Full of freedom. Full of me reclaiming what was mine. My space, my time, my sanity. No more late-night knocks. No more faces from my past trying to squeeze themselves back into a story they didn't belong in anymore. Just me, the quiet hum of my home, and the steady rhythm of a life I was finally living on my own terms. I threw myself into work, not because I needed to escape, but because it felt good to build something that was mine. Something no one could take from me. My career flourished, not because I was chasing after some promotion or pay raise, but because I had nothing holding me back. No weight dragging me down. Just forward motion. The house felt different too. I'd cleaned out every trace of her, the photos, the clothes, the little things she left behind, like ghosts of a life I no longer recognized. I replaced the furniture, repainted the walls, even got a new coffee maker. It's funny how something as simple as new curtains can make a place feel like it belongs to you again. And it did. It belonged to me. For a while, I thought I'd carry the bitterness with me forever. That every time I heard her name or thought about what she did, it'd spark that same flash of anger, that same ache in my chest. But time has a way of softening sharp edges. The anger faded, replaced by something quieter, acceptance. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't some tragic story. I was a man who got blindsided, sure. But I stood up, dusted myself off, and kept moving. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. The court didn't just side with me, they buried her in legal fees and financial obligations she'd be paying off for years. The settlement was nice, but it wasn't about the money. It was about justice. About knowing that the lies, the betrayal, the manipulation, all of it had consequences. And she felt every one of them. Months later, I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved out of state. Word was she was struggling, jobless, drowning in debt, her reputation in ruins. Maybe she thought I'd feel satisfied hearing that. Maybe a part of me did. But mostly, I didn't care. Because by then, I was too busy living my life to worry about hers. I started traveling, nothing crazy, just road trips, small towns I'd never been to. There's something healing about being in a place where no one knows your name. No one knows your story. You're just a guy in a diner, drinking coffee, watching the world go by. I met new people too. Not looking for anything serious, just connections. Conversations that didn't come with baggage or hidden agendas. Just real, simple moments. And somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad, either. I was free. Free from her. Free from the lies. Free from the version of myself that thought love meant sacrificing everything, even your own sanity. Looking back now, it feels like that part of my life happened to someone else. Like watching a movie you've seen 100 times, you know how it ends, you know the twists, and it doesn't hit you the same way anymore. Because you've moved on. And I did. So, if you've ever been blindsided, betrayed, broken down by someone you trusted, let me tell you something. It doesn't define you. It's just a chapter. And when you turn the page, you get to write the next one. Make it count. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.